Star Wars aimed to unite fans, yet significant division remains between those who prefer Legends and the canon timeline. But is this division necessary? So with this video, I know it's a slightly sensitive topic, and I do not mean to bring any hate or shame to anyone for liking what they like in Star Wars. I'm a big advocate for allowing people to like what they like and leave it at that. So with this video, I do have the intention of having a civil discussion with you all and allowing you to share your thoughts in the comment section below if you so wish to. So with that said, I myself do want to reflect some thoughts of being part of this community and why I think the war between lovers of Legends and those who prefer canon can be, for lack of better words, rather silly sometimes. You see, if you're someone like me who spends a lot of time exploring the realms of the Star Wars community through different social media platforms, you most likely have stumbled upon a great many people who have different opinions whether or not something is good or bad in Star Wars. And usually the biggest one is whether or not the decisions Disney Star Wars with their new canon timeline is better than Star Wars Legends and vice versa. And generally, I do actually think that having these discussions and these different degrees of opinions with Star Wars is a positive thing. That people have different preferences is totally fine in my book, so everything doesn't feel too rigid, and it allows for different passions within this universe to grow. For many who love Star Wars Legends, you will find them group up and talk about Darth Revan, for example, and the admirations they have for that character. And for those who enjoy Star Wars Disney Canon, they might be more inclined talking about the High Republic or any of the sequel characters. And that people share their love for these things is something that is really good for the Star Wars community, and I don't think there's anything wrong about that at all. However, what I do want to talk about when it comes to where the division might be a little bit silly, or in my opinion is quite silly, is that people from both sides of those who prefer Legends and canon, some of them do get really angry when they hear an opinion of Star Wars that they do not agree with. And I think the constant persistency of this in the community isn't exactly very good when it turns into a degree of toxicity from both sides. People who enjoy Star Wars Legends can be as aggressive as those who enjoy Star Wars canon. For example, there are many people in Star Wars Legends today who would rather see Star Wars Legends timeline material be added back into the canon timeline, where people who love the canon timeline would prefer that new characters are created and that we disregard all of the stuff or many of the things that we find in the Legends timeline. And when people project these opinions as some form of attack against one another, it creates this division in Star Wars that don't benefit any side whatsoever. It's almost like infighting within the Star Wars universe. It doesn't lead to anywhere and it doesn't help anything. The fact of the matter is, Disney Star Wars bought Star Wars because they had their vision, and George Lucas accepted it. And now we have to live with that decision that was made many years ago. Regardless if one likes it or not, it's just one thing we have to accept. I do believe a lot of people should be mature enough to understand that some things are just outside of our control, and these things develop outside of our control. We as fans do not navigate the entire Star Wars franchise. We can influence it by the way we interact with the Star Wars franchise that is today, but at the end of the day, it's not our material to control. Now with that said, I want to clarify something because it might sound like I'm defending Star Wars Disney right now. And the fact of the matter is that I'm highly critical of the decisions of Star Wars Disney and generally prefer Star Wars Legends. I read up to 2 or 3 Star Wars Legends books every month, and these books are what keeps me entertained with Star Wars alongside the video games and the comics. And some of the things that I've been thinking about greatly recently is that these two timelines are clearly separated, and that either of them aren't trying to force anyone in the community from having to consider both when enjoying Star Wars. It's all optional. One can choose exactly what timeline they want to focus on, and they can also enjoy a mix of both timelines if they so choose. And I fall into that latter category where I enjoy a mix of both, but leaning more towards the Legends timeline. But that doesn't mean that the way I voice my opinions on Star Wars should be directed in an aggressive manner towards those who do not agree with me. And another thing I've been thinking about is, for example, that a lot of people talk about how Disney Star Wars has ruined Star Wars. Well, the same people who do say that also praise Star Wars Legends to be the best. So if it's the best, then why does it matter what Disney Star Wars do with their canon timeline? It's not George Lucas's timeline, because that clearly ended with the Return of the Jedi. So it baffles me a little bit when people for Star Wars Legends say that Star Wars Legends is the best thing from Star Wars, and yet they complain that Star Wars canon is bad and that it ruined Star Wars. To me, that doesn't make much sense, because at least from someone who prefers Star Wars Legends, I know that Star Wars Legends is a perfect place to go back to if I feel something is not right with the canon timeline. The Star Wars Legends has so much material, so much lore, that it would take Disney Star Wars many decades to create anywhere near the amount of material that we find in Legends. But we can say something similar about canon as well. Canon Star Wars shouldn't represent the entirety of Star Wars altogether, at least in a way that's meant to lessen the opinions of those who prefer Star Wars Legends. For I've seen a lot of people who prefer Star Wars canon to completely ignore or block people because they don't think that Star Wars Legends has anything to do with Star Wars that we enjoy today. My point with all of this is that there are so many variables where people are just so uncertain of how to handle these different opinions and what they're going to do about it, that it just creates this clear, evident division between the Star Wars community that doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't lead to anywhere, it doesn't conclude, it's just a weird center of conflict. And to me, that's at least where I wanted Star Wars Downlink to separate itself a little bit, because although I create a lot of Legends material, and as I said, I do generally prefer it, I respect everyone's opinions on Star Wars, and it doesn't mean I agree with them, but I definitely want to hear people's take on Star Wars, and many people might say that these takes are horrible or that people shouldn't have these opinions, but again, that's not my responsibility to try and control. My responsibility is to enjoy what I enjoy with Star Wars and talk about that if I so choose. And Star Wars Downlink is meant for people to be able to talk about Star Wars from both sides. This is a place where I hope we can have civil discussions about Star Wars without fighting, and respect the different flavors of opinions we have with Star Wars. And if we don't respect them, the best thing is to simply not respond and just enjoy what we enjoy. At least that is the practice that I follow. Now, I'm not going to try to force anyone to do this, but it's definitely a point of view that one can follow if they so choose to. I'm definitely going to try to follow that path when it comes to how I want to enjoy Star Wars. Now, with all that said, I do think it's still important that we be critical about the creative decisions made by Disney and how they treat Star Wars. Because obviously one of the disadvantages that Legends fans can have in this current time period of Star Wars is that Disney Canon are producing content like movies and shows, which are a fundamental attraction of Star Wars, and just the idea of being given movies and shows more regularly is very much enjoyable. And Star Wars Legends will most likely never see anything new being produced for it ever again, unless something really dramatic changes with the structure of Star Wars. So with that, Disney Star Wars most certainly have a responsibility to maintain the integrity of the Star Wars universe, and fans should also talk about it if they create things that they view as poorly made. But again, it's important to do so in a respectful way, and that we keep in mind that Star Wars Legends is always there to be relied on for alternative stories if we find that some of the stories in Star Wars canon are not good enough. I just wanted to reflect some thoughts that I had on this and the clear separation in the community. And it's not to say that the Star Wars community is incapable of getting along together even though they have different opinions and views. It's just that some people are so vocal about it that they try to push others' opinions of Star Wars down and try to lift themselves up. And I don't think that adds any value to the community whatsoever. And this video is definitely not meant to try and offend anyone, it's just my perspective being elaborated on. And if you disagree with me, that's completely fine. If you agree with me, that's also completely fine. And if you have something to say regarding this in the comment section below, I would love to hear what you have to say, because Star Wars is one of the things I love the most in this entire world, and I have no plans of disregarding it despite the different various opinions whatsoever. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and do remember, the Force is always with you.